hell?
It's been a long time, Loaten.
A long time since what?
I don't know. Usually that's how antagonists normally do a dramatic entrance.
Whatever. What do you want anyway, Dr. Eggman?
Haha, I'm glad you asked. I'm here to make you! Wait, did you just call me Dr. Eggman?
Yeah, sorry, I got Sonic on the mind. What was your name? I know what it is. It's on the tip of my tongue. You know what? I'm just gonna call you Rick.
Yeah, name me after the legendary pickle, why don't you? Anyway, do you know why I am here?
Yeah, I'm starting to put shit together. My viewers are here, you suddenly show up, and my door is locked. Is this one of those intro skits people put at the beginning of their reviews where randos like you take something away from me, in which case my freedom, and the only way to get it back is to review a shitty game you give me?
Oh, what? No, what are you talking about? I never planned so ridiculously predictable.
Just give me the fucking games already.
Fine. You got me. Happy? Here. I had to suffer the wrath of this orange furball. And now, you will too.
Oh, the Crash Bandicoot Trilogy. I love these games.
Now, in order to gain your freedom, you must play through all three— Wait, what did you say?
Oh, you're Dr. Cortex.
What the f***? I thought you said Crash Bandicoot was your #1 most hated video game franchise.
No, I said the exact opposite. I said it was my #1 favorite video game series.
I did.
Well, that had just happened. You know, since I have 'em, why not review the Crash Bandicoot Trilogy? I mean, these are some of my favorite games of all time. Man, how am I gonna go about this? Let's get started anyway.
Crash Bandicoot is a love story about Naughty Dog and their passion for making great games. Developed by Naughty Dog and published by Universal Interactive, the original PS1 Crash Trilogy are some of my favorite games of all time. Sure, they aren't flawless by any means, but playing these games give me a nice, warm, comfortable feeling. Whether it's the originals on PS1 or the remakes for current-gen consoles, the original Crash Bandicoot Trilogy is the textbook example of classic, in my opinion at least. Now I love these games, yeah, but I love each of them for their own individual reasons. So why not we start off with the 1996 original, Crash Bandicoot. Interesting relationship with Crash 1. It was far from my first Crash Bandicoot game, and as a result of being spoiled by future games, I'm gonna be real here, but for a while I hated Crash Bandicoot 1. Even when the Insane Trilogy came out, I still thought Crash 1 was a dull experience. And after looking at some reviews of Crash 1, I feel like a lot of people were biased by nostalgia. However, I learned a little mental trick. If I sound like Cosmonaut Variety Rower right now, it's because I got this idea from one of his videos. Now, the one thing I didn't mention at the beginning of this video was that I'm an early 2000s kid, meaning I started with these Crash games, and not these ones. These games are literally older than I am, so I didn't feel comfortable with how Crash 1 in particular was. But I decided recently to replay the original Crash 1 for PS1, and I pretended to meld my brain to those in 1996. I pretended that I never played a Crash game before in my life, and that this was the first 3D game I had ever played. And replaying Crash 1 with this mindset gave me a new perspective of Crash Bandicoot 1 altogether. And now, I really like Crash 1. I still don't think it's an amazing game, but it's iconic and revolutionary, and I can't deny that. The thing about Crash 1 is that this is obviously the first game in this series, and that's what makes Crash 1 nice and simple. The story is a simple damsel in distress to the rescue plot, and I'm okay with that. The levels are as basic as you can get for a linear 3D platformer. Everything progresses in a hallway-esque fashion. Sometimes the perspective changes to shaking things up a bit, but aside from that, all the levels play the same way. Get to the end of the level. Levels come in many different flavors. You have the generic Sonic's ass levels in the jungles. You have the generic side-scrolling climbing up a castle or native fortress levels. You have the levels where you run up a river. You have levels where Crash tries to prevent himself from being mugged by sentient rocks. And you have levels where you ride a hog who's always running forward, only allowing you to move left or right, dodging various things along the way. So yeah, for today's standards, Crash Bandicoot doesn't do anything mind-blowing in terms of variety. With this game being the first in the series, things are very limited. There are no nitros or locked boxes to be seen. You can't crawl, slide, nor body slam. It's jumping and spinning to the very end, which may sound boring, and in some cases, it is. I feel that some levels like Sunset Vista can overstay their welcome quite a bit, but some levels like Cortex Power can be challenging while also being short and sweet, at least if you're doing any percent. And this leads to the game's pacing to be very inconsistent. Bosses are about as simple as letting them attack until they leave an opening. Some bosses like Crackback Fever over here are easy as cake, while other bosses like Embryo can give you a bit more trouble. And I still think the final boss in this game is the best final boss in the series. Sure, it isn't as challenging and as action-packed like Wrath of Cortex's final boss, but just the setting, standing on a purple dirigible, seeing the castle you just climbed through being burnt into flames, with the owner of said castle, the main villain of the game, super pissed and is about to pop your ass with cotton candy. And the music, it's so calm and peaceful, yet dramatic and action-packed. Speaking of music, this game's soundtrack is... Don't misunderstand, these are some very well composed tracks, but it kinda has to do with your personal taste. In this game, the music is more percussive and rhythmic based, while the music in the later games tend to be more melodic. I tend to enjoy the soundtrack from the later Crash games, but that doesn't mean this game doesn't have some good beats. I already mentioned the final boss theme, but I also like themes like Toxic Waste and Heavy Machinery. To put it short, this game's soundtrack was very mixed for me. Last subject I want to touch upon regarding Crash 1 is the 100% route. Crash Bandicoot 1 is infamous for having an incredibly unforgiving 100% route. In order to 100% the game, you need to collect all of the gems, and doing this requires you to break all of the boxes in each of the levels without dying. And it's because of this that I have never even attempted to 100% this game. Like, Crash 1 is already hard enough as is. You expect me to break all of the crates and all of the levels all in one life, and when the same system is dependent on you completing bonus rounds? No. You can fuck right off. The Insane Trilogy remake does fix this issue a bit, but the issue still applies to colored gems, which I guess isn't a reasonable compromise, but still isn't my cup of tea.
And to all the people who have 100% of this game, how are you all alive?
But that's Crash Bandicoot 1, and it's good. Just good. Not amazing, not mind-blowing, not a life-changing experience, but just an average, good, fun game. However, I think the sequels are much better. Speaking of which... Look, I hate to jump the gun a bit here, but I'm just gonna say it. I fucking love this game. It's so good. It is one of my favorite games of all time. Crash 2, in my opinion, is the perfect sequel. Not a perfect game, but a perfect sequel. I call sequels perfect, implying they improve on all aspects of its predecessor, and Crash 2 improves on everything, from the story to the soundtrack, from the graphics to the gameplay. Crash 2 improves all the things Crash 1 did right while fixing its flaws. One improvement right off the bat are Crash's controls. Crash's movement, whether it's on the ground or in the air, is completely precise. It's a little weird to have a stop on the dime control scheme, but it's much better than the slight inertia you gain in Crash 1. And plus, once you get used to it, it's so much fun. This was the game that implemented the slide, crawl, and body slam moves to Crash's moveset. One thing I find particularly enjoyable while playing is slide jumping and slide spinning. They're both really good methods of gaining speed, and once you get really good at the levels, it can be really fun to just dash right through all the levels Donkey Kong Country style. The levels in this game have much more than they did in Crash 1. This is the game that introduces the locked box and nitro crate. Crates that would continue to be in the Crash games from here on. The boar levels from the first game make a return, except it's a baby polar bear. Yeah, you know Crash, for someone who's trying to save the world and be a hero, you seem to take a lot of stride in animal cruelty. You sick bastard, you. Animal abuse aside, these levels control much better than they did in Crash 1. In addition to a polar bear, we also get two other gameplay styles, the jet board and the jet pack. Both not only having action figure variations where Crash is sunburnt to hell, but they also control rather meh. I don't know, the jet board and jetpack controls work, but they aren't really that fun. They're not a chore to play, but they're not as fun as the main game itself. They serve more as little mini sections to break away from the traditional platforming so you don't burn out. At least to me. To Naughty Dog at the time, it was a bit of variety, which is good. Until they overdo it, you know what, I'm gonna save that part for Crash 3, but back on topic. Another improvement, and probably the biggest improvement, is 100%ing the game. Now, I haven't 100%ed this game yet, I kinda stopped at the last warp room, but I can certainly say that I would 100% this game over Crash 1, on repeated playthroughs if I really wanted to. For one, you can die as many times as you please and still get the box gem, which is just a lifesaver, just beautiful. No longer do I have to be anxious while trying to get a gem. I can get in there, smash all the boxes, and my own skull in the process. Also, the bosses in this game are better, but not by much. And despite being an amazing game of decent bosses, it has probably the worst final boss I have played in a video game. Seriously, even as a kid, I thought this was a joke. I could go on a tangent on how shitty this boss is. And you know what? That's what I'm gonna do. For one, it's a jetpack boss. Yes, we're playing the final boss in a vehicle that we legit only played 2 times in the whole game, both of which being in the same warp zone as this very boss fight. So that's pretty lame. Also, we're stopping Cortex from, I guess, taking the crystals back to his space station? At least that's what's implied in the Insane Trilogy remake. But this is such a dull setting. It's literally nothing but an easy-ass space chase that lasts like 20 seconds long, if that. It sucks too because the last few levels were reasonably hard. It made the upcoming battle with Cortex all the more exciting. Imagine being disappointed with a 20-second boss that doesn't even challenge you in the slightest. And how do you go from Crash 1's final boss to this shit? The final boss in Crash 1 was exciting, tense, and climactic, while Crash 2's is like taking a breath of fresh air. You do it without even thinking about it. I'm sorry to get up in arms over something that almost everyone agrees is terrible, but I cannot emphasize how much of a letdown this was for me as a kid, especially of how good the game was up to this point. But with that little rant out of the way, all I have left to say is, I love Crash Bandicoot 2. Call me a basic bitch, but I personally think this is the best game in the series. All the bits and pieces that make up this game fit together just so well. Whenever anyone brings up Crash Bandicoot, this is the first game that comes to mind. So it's all downhill from here on.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Post-editing Loaten here, and I'm here to bring up a little topic about Crash Warped that I was gonna bring up in the review, but for some reason forgot to write it in the script. I did write it in an earlier revision, but I forgot to write it in this revision. So, yeah, idiot, I know. But basically, I think Crash Warped is the first of many games that would start the trend of having unfocused gameplay. I'll elaborate more on this in my Wrath and Twinsanity review, but basically, Crash Warped would be the beginning of kind of the downhill of the Crash series, and I think that's mainly due to the unfocused nature of the gameplay that it would be in this game and every game after it. Well, specifically Wrath and Twinsanity. And I'll elaborate more on that in my Wrath and Twinsanity revisit. But for now, let's start talking about Warped.
I have a really complicated relationship with Crash Bandicoot Warped. On one hand, I have a ton of nostalgia for this game. This was the first PS1 Crash game I owned, and it had the most appeal to me as a child, at least compared to the other games in the trilogy, and in fact, it's the first and so far only game in the series I actually bothered to 100%. I loved it that much. But on the other hand, well, let's talk about it. Before I talk about anything, I just want to make it abundantly clear I do not dislike Crash 3, not by a long shot. In fact, I still think this is a great game. However, this game is in the unfortunate position of being compared to Crash 2, which I think is a much better game, and I'm going to make my case as to why that is. Probably the biggest issue with the game is the overabundance of vehicle levels. This can be seen as soon as you step into the first warp zone. Out of the first 5 levels, only 2 of them are traditional Crash levels. The other 3 are vehicle levels. I could literally just end the video right here. But of course, when people say that, they don't actually end the video, and this particular case ain't no exception. There are too many vehicle levels, and it almost ruins what is a decent platformer. I say almost because the majority of vehicles are honestly not that bad. I kinda enjoy the tiger, airplane, and water levels. However, the jet ski and motorcycle levels are not that good in my opinion. Their flawed and awkward control schemes make it very hard to come back to. Well, what about Crash's levels? Well, thankfully Crash has the same controls from Crash 2, except Crash's jumps are back to having the inertia like in Crash 1. It doesn't bother me too much as the controls are designed well with the levels, but I think it was worth stating because I personally preferred the precision-based platforming controls from Crash 2. Different strokes for different folks, you know? But putting that aside, how are Crash's levels? Well, they're fun solely for the fact that Crash is just fun to control. Aside from that, I don't know, I found the level design to be more shallow compared to the ones in Crash 2. Crash 2's levels felt focused. They always upped the ante with more complicated enemies and level design. Crash 3 doesn't really do that. The only time I felt really challenged was by Tomb Raider and Bug Light. And even then, those levels still kinda felt easy. So far, the impression is not that good. But don't worry, I do have some positive things to say about Crash 3. I think the game is visually stunning for the PS1. I know I haven't talked about graphics in these games yet, and that's mainly because it should go without saying that all 3 of these games are beautiful looking for the PS1. But Crash Warped, in my opinion, looks the best. With vibrant colors and active looking environments, Crash Warped just nails it. Like, it should not be fucking possible to have this much shit on screen on a PS1 game. Like, that's just blowing my mind, seriously. Crash Warped also nails the bosses. I truly think that Crash Warped has the best bosses in the whole series. All of the bosses have some of these talking head cutscenes to build them up and introduce a bit of their character. I remember being mentally challenged seeing these bastards tease me. When I finally saw them face to face, it was exciting and beating them felt all the more satisfying. The bosses themselves are much improved. The fan favorite is Dingodile, although my personal favorite is Entropy. Some of the bosses this time around offer a fair bit of challenge, having to come up with the correct way to dodge Tropy's projectiles or maneuvering around Tiny's lions. God damn, these bosses actually did kick my ass the first few tries. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say for Warped. It's a great game, though compared to Crash 2, I think it's highly inferior. It feels like Naughty Dog wanted to make you feel a sense of variety in Crash Warped. It's a game about time travel, so I agree this is appropriate. However, the execution is questionable. The amount of vehicle levels is too fucking high in this game, and like I said, it makes it very hard to come back to on repeat playthroughs. But that doesn't mean Crash Warped isn't a good game. Crash Warped is a great game, and though I may not think it's as good or better than Crash 2, I still think it's an amazing way to cap this amazing trilogy.
So those were my thoughts on the original Crash Bandicoot Trilogy. And I'm just gonna be real here, this video was really hard to write for. Because I'm not just talking about some highly praised games that have been, highly praised, but I'm talking about some of my favorite games of all time. I've been playing these games for years, so it's kind of hard to articulate my thoughts without sounding the same as everyone else. I've literally wrote not one, not two, but 3 different scripts articulating my thoughts on these games, and I never really found one the most appropriate, so I thought this one was the best way I could do it. 5 minutes a piece, talking about each game, make up for a decent 15 to 20 minute video. I don't know how long this will be, but somewhere around those lines. But you know what? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, I really do. But you know what? I'm not done with Crash Bandicoot yet. No. Because I made a review of some games a few years ago, and well, they need a bit of a revisiting, because those old reviews are, well, old for a reason, and definitely outdated. Okay, my thoughts on Wrath of Cortex have stayed roughly the same since the review, but Twin Sandy is more of the one that I actually want to talk about. But regardless of such, next time I see you guys with the Orange Marsupial, we'll be tackling the Traveler's Tales duology, Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex, and Crash Twin Sandy. With that said, I'll see you guys later.